Morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishna is Pesachim, Perek Ches, chapter 8, Mishna Vav, Mishna 6. Ha'einain. An einain means someone who has just lost a very close relative. Now, let me read to you. We need some background about this einain. Upon the death of any of one's 7 closest relatives, which includes father, mother, brother, sister, son, daughter, or spouse, a person enters a state called aninus, which lasts until burial and is known as an onain. An onain is biblically forbidden to eat from sacrificial offerings until nightfall of the day on which the death occurred. Okay, so midaraisa, you are an onain on the day of the death, okay, which really includes the day of the burial also. And for our purposes, all we need to know is that an onain cannot eat from a carbon. Rabbinic law extends this prohibition to the night after the death as well, even if the relative was buried during that day. Okay, so even if the night after the death, the night after the burial, that is considered an onain midrabanan. And that's very important to know for our Mishnah. Okay, now, so we say an onain, but mefakeach hasagal. Mefakeach hasagal means someone who is digging out from under rubble. A building collapsed on top of a person. The person's under the rubble, and there are people now trying to dig him out. We don't know if this person is alive or if the person is dead. If the person is dead, then we say that all the people trying to dig him out became tamei. Either they became tamei because they touched the corpse, or because, we'll elaborate on this a little bit more later, or because just the mere fact that they leaned over the rubble means that they leaned over the corpse. That made them an ohel, a tent over the corpse. That makes them tamei that way. So, but this person right now, the case that we have here of the person who is trying to dig out from under the rubble is, we don't know yet if the person is alive or dead. And in the case of the onain before that we just started off with, we're talking about the onain is not tamei because he touched his dead relative in any way. That's not the issue here. He did not become tamei from them, but he's in the state of aninus. So we have the first case is an onain. The second case is a person who is trying to dig out someone from under a pile of rubble. Someone who's in jail, and they promise to let him out for Pesach, that he should be able to eat the carbon Pesach. Someone ill or somebody elderly, that they are able to eat a kazayas of the meat. Okay, because kazayas is the minimal amount that you need to fulfill the mitzvah of eating the carbon Pesach. So if we're talking about somebody elderly, somebody sick, but they're still able to eat, they're well enough to eat a kazayas, they're strong enough to eat a kazayas, sheichatin alayim, we will shech the carbon Pesach for them. They will be able to partake of the carbon Pesach. Now, the person, let's go through the cases we just had, the case that we just listed above. The first case was the onain. Now, if we're not talking about the onain daraisa. An onain daraisa can't eat from the carbon Pesach. But that's not really gonna. But we're talking about now the night after the death and the night after the burial, where he is an onain midrabanan. Now, if he's an onain midrabanan, then in midrabanan he can't eat from a carbon. Nonetheless, when it comes to the carbon Pesach, the Chachamim basically took off their decree and they allowed him to eat from the carbon Pesach, because the carbon Pesach is a very strict carbon. If you don't get carbon Pesach, you can be chayiv kares under situations where you were able to do it and you didn't. So the stringency of a carbon Pesach is what dictates that the Chachamim decided that their rabbinic decree of an onain, not again the day after the death, his prohibition of eating from karbanis will not apply to the carbon Pesach. So therefore, if the night of Pesach is that night after the death and the burial, he will be able to partake. Now, let's say the person who is mefakeach hasagal, the person who is digging out. Now, in that case, the story is like this. This person does not know whether the person is dead. Okay? We don't know if he's dead or not. What's 1 second? Right. It's a suffix, right? It's a doubt. We don't know. It's the person alive, person dead.
Doesn't even know if there's someone dead underneath.
No, they know there's somebody there.
Right.
They know there's somebody there, but they don't know what's the story. So, being that we don't know yet whether the person is dead or not, which means we don't know if the person who's been digging the rubble became tamei or not, we have a rule called a cheskas tahara. That means we assume, since until now he has been tahar, he retains that status. We'll read to you from the bottom. This is based on the principle of chazaka, which tells us to assume in cases of doubt that a person's legal status has not changed. So until he started dealing with this rubble, he was tahar. Now the question is that by being involved with this rubble, did he become tamei? So chazaka says that we assume that he retains the status that he had until now. And therefore, if you don't know that he became tamei, you assume he's tahar, and therefore he can be included in the Korban Pesach. The person who was promised to get out of jail, we assume that these people who promised him that he's going to get out will keep their promise. And since we can assume that they're going to keep their promise, we say that you could shech the Korban Pesach for him. And the case of the chayil and the zaken, as long as these people who are sick or elderly, as long as they can eat a korban, they can. We know that right now, by the time we shech the Korban Pesach, they can eat a kazayas of its meat. They can eat a kazayas of it. Then therefore they are eligible to eat from the Korban Pesach, and we shech the Korban Pesach for them. So that's the first half of the Mishnah. In all these cases, we will be able to have them participate in the Korban Pesach. We'll shech the Korban Pesach for them. Al kulan. But let's say we're talking about a case where all the people of this group all the people who want to now shech the Korban Pesach are one of these five. They're all Eidanim. They're all people that were involved. That they're all people that have been involved in digging out the rubble. They're all people that are supposed to get out of jail. They're all people that are sick or elderly. If that's the case, al kulan, if the entire group consists of these people, or the whole group consists of all these different people together, ein shechtin aleim b'fnei atzman. You cannot shech the Korban Pesach for them alone. The only people participating in this group are the people that we just listed. We're not going to shech the Korban Pesach for them. Why? Shema yaviu es hapes lidei psul. Because they may bring the Korban Pesach to become invalid. Because we are concerned when all of them are from these people that things may not work out as we hope. And if it comes out at the end, if you shech the Korban Pesach and no one can, so we don't want to shech the Korban Pesach and then bring it to psul to becoming invalid if in case no one of them can eat from it. So what are we concerned about exactly? Right. Again, the problem is that we're concerned that if all of the entire group consists of these people, it could come out the Korban Pesach isn't going to be eaten. It's not going to be eaten. It's going to be invalid. It's going to have to be burnt. So we're not going to shech the Korban Pesach just for them. If they are a part of another group of people that don't have any of these issues, then we'll include them. But if the whole group only consists of these people, we're not going to. Now, so what's the issue? So we have to then go through the cases. In the case of the onain, right? We said that the Rabbanan, said that their decree of an onain after the night of death, that he can't eat from karbanis, we take that off. So what's the problem? The problem is, number one, that we are concerned that perhaps that if his relative has not been buried yet, that perhaps out of grief, he's going to land up touching them. If he lands up touching them, he's for sure tamei, and then he can't bring the Korban Pesach. So we could have shechted the Korban Pesach for him, and then it's going to come out that he's going to go ahead and touch the dead body of his close relative, or even if the dead relative has already been buried, we're afraid that in his grief he's not going to eat the Korban Pesach. He's just going to be so broken that he's not going to eat it. If that again, so that's one concern that could happen. We may allow him to. We right now we may be saying that if he's together with another group, we'll include him in the Korban Pesach. But if he or the other ones are the only ones here, we're concerned that it could come out that no one's going to eat this Korban Pesach. So we have a concern about the oinain, the concern about the person who is digging out from under the rubble. The problem is that they may discover, right, that there is a dead body under there. If there is a dead body under there, that means he was tummy to begin with. He was tummy from the beginning. And therefore, he would be disqualified. The person who they promised to put him in jail, you know what the problem is? So the Bartanura says that we're talking about he has been jailed by non-Jews. And if he's been jailed by non-Jews, even if they promise to let him out, who says they're going to do it? So you could assume, again, to include him with other people, you can include him. You could, at now, right at this point of time, you could assume they're going to keep their promise, fine. But if again he's one of the only, if he's if people like him are the only people on the Carbon Pesach, we're concerned that it could actually go wrong at the end, and we're not going to check the Carbon Pesach then for in that situation. Again, for him, either if all people like him or together with other people. That's a person in jail. But Bartanura adds, interestingly, but if let's say he's in a Jewish jail. Now, what's a Jewish jail for? A Jewish jail is for a person who, let's say, the Bartanura says, let's get it right, let me say it right here. Right. Let's say he's married to a woman he's not allowed to be married to, and he's not listening. That person will be put in jail. A person who was obligated to pay money and refuses to pay, he can be put in jail. So those people, well, he doesn't want he's supposed to give, and he's not doing it. So these people. So again, if they're in a Jewish jail and the Jewish warden says you got out for Pesach, you can believe him. Interesting. Also, Bartanura says, let's say he's in a non-Jewish jail, okay, but he's in a situation where the non-Jewish jail is in Yerushalayim. So you know what they can do? They'll take some Carbon Pesach and bring it to him in a cell. So these are some of the Bartanura is saying these are some of the ways that it could still work even if it doesn't get out of jail. But the way the Mishna is talking about is he's in a jail that's of non-Jews, and they promise him to let him out, and he's not in Yerushalayim, which means he's got to get out of there and make his way to Yerushalayim. And again, we have a concern that he may not get out, they may not keep their word. So again, he is another situation where for people just like him, we're not going to go ahead and shech the Carbon Pesach. In the situation of the people who are sick or elderly, okay, we shech the Carbon Pesach because they seem to be well enough to eat a kazayas of meat. But by the time night comes around, the time to eat the Carbon Pesach, they may get sicker, they may not be able to do it. So therefore, were we to go ahead and just have a group of all these people or all these people together, where each one of them we have a concern that could come out that at the end of the day, they won't eat the Carbon Pesach, and the Carbon Pesach will become invalid because nobody's eating it, and we'll have to burn it. So we're not going to shech the Carbon Pesach just for people like them. Okay, but we will include them with others. Lefikach, therefore, if let's say we shech the Carbon Pesach for them, as we said before, and at the end of the day, it comes out that some kind of validation happened to them afterwards. When the Carbon Pesach was shechted, they were okay. And then afterwards, things went bad. Okay? That means that, let's just talk about the case, the Onain, we shech the Carbon Pesach for him, came the night, he just didn't show. He couldn't bring himself to eat. The people who weren't well weren't able to eat. The guy who was supposed to get out of jail didn't get out. Okay? What do we say? So now it comes out at the end. We shech the Carbon Pesach for them, but he didn't eat from it. Peturin milatzos Pesach Sheni. They're exempt from having to bring a Pesach Sheni. Because as we've learned previously, if at the time of the slaughtering of the Carbon Pesach and at the time of the sprinkling of the blood, everything was good, but something went wrong later on that they can't eat, you're supposed to eat. That's the main part of the Carbon Pesach is to eat. But at the end of the day, it came out that you couldn't eat. You've done the mitzvah. And therefore, in all these cases, since at the time that we slaughtered the animal, we were able to do that, we can include them in the Carbon Pesach. We halachically were able to include them in the Carbon Pesach. Even if at the end something happens that they can't eat, they still have fulfilled their mitzvah. The exception is the person who's been digging the rubble. Because if at the end you find a dead body under there, that means then we assume that from the beginning, when he started dealing with this pile of rubble, that he was already tamei, and therefore we can't say, well, during the time of Shechita, he was okay. For the time of Shechita, he wasn't okay. That's what comes out. because because he already had been dealing with this rebel before the shechita. Now that we find the dead body, we assume that he became tamei already from before. If that's what we assume, then the carbon pay, then his being included in the carbon pesach was a complete mistake. Now they add something interestingly here in the notes, okay, and that is this applies only if the rubble pile was narrow, so that as soon as he began removing it, he must have leaned over the corpse and become tamei. See, the issue is, right, we're not talking about necessarily that, at the end. What does it mean at the end? At the end, it means that we discover a corpse under there. Does that mean they touched it? Well, if they did touch it, okay, that's a different ballgame. But the point is that in the beginning, when they're just digging, they weren't touching the corpse. But we said we have to assume they were tamei because they leaned over it. They leaned over the pile, and therefore they were an oil. They were a tent over it. They were coming over it. That makes them tamei. But that is only going to be possible if we're talking about the rubble pile was narrow. It was a narrow pile, so that as soon as he began removing it, he must have leaned over the corpse and become tamei. But if the pile was spread out, so it is possible that he had not leaned over the body by the time the Pesach was slaughtered, he need not bring a second Pesach offering. If it's a big pile, we don't really know where he is. We don't know where he is. That means we don't have a way to. We don't have a basis to say that he must have leaned over it. Maybe he didn't. If maybe he didn't, then we already apply the chazaka that says that he was a tar until now. He remains tar. If we have a subject to become tamei, and before he was tar, the chazaka says he remained tar. The chazaka says he remained tar. That means the shechta of the carbon pesach for him was good, and therefore he doesn't have to bring a pesach sheni a month later. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.